A crowded airport terminal. Two aggressive officers. One man singled out simply because of the color of his skin. It is a scene we have heard about entirely too many times. But this specific encounter at Chicago O'Hare International Airport ended with a twist no one, especially the two profiling cops, ever saw coming. When they backed a quiet, casually dressed black man into a corner, expecting an easy intimidation tactic and a quick display of authority, they had no idea they had just illegally detained a senior federal investigator. This is the story of a routine power trip that shattered two careers in a matter of moments and the brutal instant karma that followed. Make sure you stay until the end because the fallout is absolutely spectacular. The fluorescent lights of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3 hummed with a sterile, relentless energy. It was early morning rush hour, the kind of peak time where the concourse transforms into a river of stressed business travelers, crying toddlers, and overworked airline staff. Amidst the chaos, Marcus Ellison just wanted a bad cup of airport coffee and a quiet seat by his departure gate. Marcus was in his late 30s, standing over 6 feet with a sturdy, athletic build hidden beneath layers of intentional anonymity. He wore a faded charcoal hoodie pulled over a plain black t-shirt, worn-in denim jeans, and a pair of scuffed boots. A dark canvas duffel bag was slung over his right shoulder. To the untrained eye, he looked like a construction worker heading home, or perhaps a musician dragging himself to the next gig. He looked tired, and he was. He had spent the last couple of days dismantling a multi-state money laundering syndicate operating out of a heavily guarded warehouse. He had slept for only a short time on a rigid cot in a mobile command center. Now, he was heading back to Washington, D.C. for a mandatory debriefing. All he wanted was to board his flight, close his eyes, and shut out the world. But in an airport, anonymity is a luxury not everyone is afforded. A short distance down the concourse, standing near a towering digital departures board, were officers Shane Whitaker and Caleb Torres of the Airport Police Authority. Whitaker was a veteran with a notoriously short fuse and a reputation for generating civilian complaints that somehow always disappeared from his permanent record. Torres was his junior partner, a young officer who spent most of his shifts eager to impress his hardened mentor. "Take a look at 12 o'clock, Caleb," Whitaker muttered, taking a slow sip from a disposable coffee cup. His eyes narrowed, tracking Marcus as he navigated the crowd. "Tell me what you see." Torres adjusted his utility belt, squinting down the concourse. "Guy in the hoodie looks like he's just walking." "Look closer," Whitaker said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Bag is heavy. Eyes are scanning the crowd. He's avoiding eye contact with uniform personnel. And look at the way he's walking. Too purposeful. He doesn't look like he belongs in the priority wing." It was a masterclass in confirmation bias, layered thick with unspoken prejudices. Marcus wasn't scanning the crowd out of guilt. His situational awareness was drilled into him by years of federal training. He wasn't avoiding uniforms. He was avoiding the slow-moving family of 6 dragging oversized roller bags in front of him. And his heavy bag contained case files and a federally issued laptop, not contraband. But to Whitaker, a black man in a hoodie moving quickly through a high-end terminal was all the probable cause he needed for a random stop. "You think he's a mule?" Torres asked, leaning forward, the adrenaline of a potential bust waking him up. "I think he's somebody who needs to empty his pockets," Whitaker replied, tossing his half-full coffee cup into a nearby trash can. "Let's go say hello." As the two officers began to move, pushing their way through the tide of passengers, Marcus was already aware of them. Peripheral vision is a developed skill. He had clocked the two officers leaning against the pillar moments earlier. He had noticed their shifting body language, the point of Whitaker's chin in his direction, and the sudden predatory pace they adopted. Marcus let out a slow, silent sigh. Not today, he thought. Please, guys, just go write a parking ticket. He adjusted his duffel bag and kept his pace steady, hoping they would simply pass through. He turned left, heading toward his gate. The officers mirrored his turn, cutting a sharp angle to intercept him near a relatively quiet corridor adjacent to the VIP lounges. They were closing in. Marcus's mind rapidly shifted gears from exhausted traveler to trained professional. He knew the playbook. He had seen it from the other side of the glass. He knew exactly what Whitaker and Torres were doing, and, more importantly, he knew the constitutional laws they were about to bend to do it. Excuse me, hey, you in the hoodie? Hold up a second. Whitaker's voice boomed over the ambient noise of the terminal, carrying that specific, sharp tone of artificial authority designed to make civilians freeze in their tracks. A few nearby passengers turned their heads, their expressions a mix of curiosity and relief that the officers weren't yelling at them. Marcus stopped. He didn't turn around immediately. He took one deep breath, centering himself, locking away his exhaustion and replacing it with a cool, detached calm. He slowly pivoted on his heel to face the two officers. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Marcus asked. His voice was deep, even, and polite. Whitaker stepped directly into Marcus's personal space, a classic intimidation tactic. He was slightly shorter than Marcus, which seemed to irritate him, causing him to tilt his chin up aggressively. Torres flanked Marcus on the right, resting his thumbs conspicuously behind his heavy-duty belt inches from his taser. "We need to see your boarding pass and your identification," Whitaker demanded, bypassing pleasantries entirely. He didn't say please. "May I ask why?" Marcus inquired, his hands remaining in plain sight, loosely clasping the strap of his duffel bag. "Did I commit a traffic infraction while walking?" Whitaker's jaw tightened. He didn't like people who asked questions. He liked people who stammered, apologized, and complied out of fear. "This is a secure area of the airport. We are conducting random security stops. We need to verify you have a legitimate reason to be in this terminal." "I've already cleared TSA security at the main checkpoint," Marcus pointed out reasonably. "You can't get into this terminal without scanning a valid boarding pass and going through the scanners, which means my presence here is already verified." Torres chimed in, trying to sound as tough as his partner. "We aren't TSA. We're airport police. And my partner asked for your ID. Are you refusing a lawful order?" Marcus looked at Torres, reading the nervous energy radiating off the younger cop. "I'm not refusing anything, officer. I'm simply asking for the reasonable, articulable suspicion that justifies an investigatory stop under Terry versus Ohio. Because unless I am suspected of committing a crime, being about to commit a crime, or having just committed a crime, you are detaining me without cause." The citation of case law hung in the air like a dropped anvil. A middle-aged woman in a business suit dragging a small silver suitcase paused nearby, sensing the tension. A few other travelers slowed their pace, their eyes darting between the casually dressed black man and the two bristling cops. Whitaker's face flushed a deep, mottled red. In his mind, a suspect quoting the law was the ultimate sign of disrespect and guilt. "Listen to me very carefully, pal," Whitaker snarled, dropping the professional pretense. "I don't care what a Wikipedia page you read this morning. You match the description of an individual involved in narcotics trafficking in this sector. Now, hand over the ID, take the bag off your shoulder, and place it on the ground." It was a blatant lie. Marcus knew there was no bulletin. He knew there was no description. It was a fabricated excuse to force compliance. "Officer Whitaker," Marcus said, reading the man's silver name tag, "I am going to ask you to step back. You are making a massive mistake right now. I am simply trying to catch a flight to Washington. The only place you're catching a flight to is central booking if you don't comply." Whitaker shot back, stepping even closer until he was close enough that Marcus could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Take the bag off. Now." "No," Marcus said quietly. The word dropped the temperature in the corridor by several degrees. Torres's hand moved off his belt and hovered over his handcuffs. Whitaker's eyes widened in genuine shock. He wasn't used to hearing the word no. "Are you resisting?" Whitaker asked, his voice dropping into a dangerous theatrical octave, clearly meant for the bystanders to hear. "I am giving you a lawful order to surrender your bag for a search, and you are resisting." "I am declining an unlawful search," Marcus corrected. His voice remained remarkably steady. He knew exactly where the security cameras were positioned in this corridor. He knew there was a high-definition dome camera right above the nearest departure screen, capturing every single frame of this interaction. "I do not consent to searches. I do not consent to seizures. And unless I am under arrest, I am going to turn around and walk to my gate." Whitaker reached out, his thick fingers grabbing the sleeve of Marcus's worn jacket, yanking him backward. "You aren't going anywhere." The moment Whitaker's hand clamped onto Marcus's jacket, the dynamic of the encounter shifted from an illegal detention to an assault. Marcus's reaction was instantaneous, driven by years of close-quarters defensive training, but restrained by absolute professional discipline. He didn't strike the officer. He didn't yell. Instead, he planted his feet, dropped his center of gravity slightly, and locked eyes with Whitaker. "Remove your hand from my person right now," Marcus commanded. The polite, exhausted traveler was gone. The voice that came out of him now was cold, absolute, and carried the weight of unquestionable authority. Whitaker hesitated, visibly taken aback by the sudden shift in Marcus's demeanor, but his ego, fueled by an audience of whispering bystanders and his junior partner, wouldn't let him back down. "Cuff him, Caleb," Whitaker snapped, tightening his grip on Marcus's jacket. "We're taking him to the secondary screening room. He's officially under arrest for interfering with a police officer and resisting detention." Torres unclipped his handcuffs. The metallic clink was sharp and loud. "Officer Torres," Marcus said, snapping his gaze to the younger man. "If you try to put those cuffs on me, you will be committing a federal felony. Both of you need to stop, take a breath, and think about your next move very carefully. This is your last warning." Whitaker sneered. "Federal felony? What are you, a sovereign citizen? Shut up and turn around." Whitaker reached his other hand toward the strap of Marcus's duffel bag, intending to rip it off his shoulder. "All right, we're doing this," Marcus muttered, with a swift, fluid motion that was faster than either cop could track. Marcus swatted Whitaker's hand away from his bag. Before Whitaker could react, Marcus reached his right hand deep inside the breast pocket of his hoodie. "Gun! He's reaching!" Torres yelled, his voice cracking with panic as he fumbled for his weapon. "Do not draw your weapon!" Marcus roared, a command so forceful it actually froze Torres in place. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus withdrew his hand from his chest pocket. He wasn't holding a weapon. He was holding a sleek, black leather wallet. With a flick of his wrist, he flipped it open, holding it up directly in front of Officer Whitaker's face. The fluorescent terminal lights caught the heavy gold shield pinned to the leather. Next to the shield was a rigid laminated identification card bearing a government seal, a photo of Marcus, and bold, uncompromising black text. Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Below the seal, the text read, Marcus Ellison, Special Agent, Supervisory Investigator. Whitaker froze. The air left his lungs in a sharp hiss. His eyes darted frantically from the gold shield to the photo ID, then back up to Marcus's face. The aggressive red flush on his cheeks instantly drained away, leaving his face the color of wet ash. Torres, still holding his handcuffs awkwardly in the air, leaned over to look. He swallowed hard, an audible gulp in the suddenly quiet corridor. "Special Agent Marcus Ellison, FBI Organized Crime Task Force." Marcus introduced himself, the badge still hovering inches from Whitaker's nose. "And you, Officer Whitaker, just assaulted a federal agent, attempted an illegal search of classified government property contained in this bag, and tried to effect a false arrest under color of law." Marcus slowly lowered the badge, but didn't put it away. He stared Whitaker down, watching the man's career flash before his eyes. "Now," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a quiet, lethal whisper, "let go of my jacket." Whitaker's fingers uncurled from the fabric as if the jacket had suddenly caught fire. He took a stumbling step backward, almost tripping over his own boots. Agent Ellison," Whitaker stammered, his tough guy persona collapsing into a puddle of terror. We didn't know. You weren't displaying your credentials." "I am under no obligation to display my credentials to satisfy an unconstitutional fishing expedition," Marcus replied coldly. "You targeted me the moment you saw me walk past your coffee stand. You bypassed dozens of people carrying bags, acting frantic, rushing to gates. You picked me out because of how I look, and you fabricated a story about a narcotic suspect to justify it." "Sir, it was a misunderstanding," Torres piped up, his voice shaking. "We were just following terminal security protocols." Marcus turned his freezing glare to the younger officer. "Don't insult my intelligence, Torres. I sat in a squad car for years before I got my shield. I know exactly what you were doing. The problem is you picked the absolute worst person in this airport to try it on." A crowd had definitely formed now. Several people had their smartphones out, recording the aftermath. The sight of two aggressive cops suddenly cowering before a calm, casually dressed man had drawn an audience. Just then, a voice broke through the murmurs of the crowd. "What is going on here? Whitaker, Torres!" Pushing her way through the ring of onlookers was Helen Carver, a senior TSA supervisor, flanked by another airport police sergeant. She took one look at the two pale officers, then looked at Marcus, her eyes dropping immediately to the open FBI wallet in his hand. "Sergeant," Marcus said, addressing the newly arrived ranking officer. "My name is Special Agent Ellison. Your two officers here just attempted an unlawful detainment and assault. I need you to secure their badge numbers, confiscate their body camera footage immediately, and direct me to your precinct captain, because we are about to have a very long, very serious conversation." The walk from Terminal 3 to the Airport Police Authority's main administrative precinct was a silent, suffocating march. Sergeant Harlan, the supervisor who had intervened, led the way, his face grim and tight. Behind him walked Special Agent Marcus Ellison. His demeanor was as composed and unreadable as a slab of granite. Trailing several paces back, flanked by two other quiet officers, were Whitaker and Torres. Neither of them spoke. The bravado that had fueled Whitaker just moments earlier had evaporated, replaced by a cold, sickening dread that settled heavily in the pit of his stomach. The precinct was a stark contrast to the glossy, sunlit expanses of the airport terminal, hidden behind an unmarked security door near baggage claim. It was a drab labyrinth of cinder block walls, flickering fluorescent tubes, and the smell of stale coffee and industrial floor wax. Harlan ushered Marcus directly into the glass-walled office of Captain Victor Lang, the commanding officer of the morning shift. Lang, a heavy-set man with a thick silver mustache and the perpetually exhausted look of a middle manager, was in the middle of biting into a bagel when they entered. "Captain," Harlan said, closing the door behind Marcus and deliberately locking the blinds to shield the office from the bullpen outside. "We have a massive situation." Lang wiped his mouth, his eyes darting from Harlan's tense posture to Marcus, who remained standing, his posture perfectly straight. "What kind of situation?" Marcus didn't wait for the sergeant to explain. He reached into his jacket, retrieved his leather wallet, and placed it open on Lang's desk. The gold shield gleamed harshly under the desk lamp. "Captain Lang," Marcus said, his voice stripped of any conversational warmth. "My name is Special Agent Marcus Ellison, FBI Organized Crime Task Force. Moments ago, 2 of your officers, Whitaker and Torres, stopped me without probable cause or reasonable suspicion, attempted an illegal search of my belongings, and physically assaulted me when I declined to surrender my property." Lang stared at the badge. The color drained from his face so fast he looked physically ill. He looked up at Harlan, praying for a contradiction. "Harlan, tell me this is a joke." "It's not, Cap," Harlan said softly. "I pulled them off him near the VIP lounges. There's a crowd. Bystanders were filming." Lang dragged a heavy hand down his face, letting out a breath that sounded like a deflating tire. He knew Whitaker. He knew Whitaker was a liability, a bully who had skated by on union protections and a severe lack of departmental oversight. But this was the nightmare scenario. "Agent Ellison, please sit down," Lang scrambled, gesturing to a vinyl chair. "I am profoundly sorry. Let's figure this out. I'm sure it was a gross misinterpretation of our security mandates." "Do not insult me by calling it a misinterpretation, Captain," Marcus interrupted, remaining standing. "It was textbook racial profiling. Whitaker saw a black man in a hoodie carrying a duffel bag, decided I didn't belong in the priority terminal, and fabricated a non-existent narcotics bulletin to force an unconstitutional stop. He then physically grabbed me, but that isn't even the worst part." Marcus unzipped the heavy canvas duffel bag he had been carrying and pulled out a reinforced matte black Pelican case. He set it on the desk next to his badge. "Do you know what this is, Captain?" Marcus asked. Lang shook his head slowly, his eyes wide. "This is a federally encrypted hard drive," Marcus explained, tapping the top of the case. "It contains raw, unredacted wiretap audio and financial ledgers from an active multi-state organized crime syndicate that my team just raided. It contains the names of undercover operatives and confidential informants whose lives are currently on the line." Lang swallowed audibly. The silence in the office was deafening. "Your officer," Marcus continued, his voice dropping into a register of lethal calm, "attempted to forcibly seize this bag in a public terminal. If he had succeeded, if he had breached this case or compromised the chain of custody of these files, he wouldn't just be facing a civil rights lawsuit. He would be facing federal espionage and obstruction charges. He would be sitting in a federal penitentiary by the end of the week. That is how close your department just came to triggering a national security incident." Lang slumped back in his chair, utterly defeated. "Where are they?" he rasped to Harlan. "Holding room 2, stripped of their weapons. The union rep, Harlan, just walked into the building," Harlan replied. "Get Harlan in here and pull the camera feeds," Lang ordered, his voice shaking. "Pull the dome cameras. Pull their body cams. I want every angle on a hard drive right now." Down the hall, in a small, windowless interrogation room, Whitaker was pacing like a caged animal. Torres sat at the metal table, his head in his hands, trembling. "We're dead," Whitaker muttered. "Shane," Torres whispered, his voice cracking. "We assaulted a Fed. We're going to prison." "Shut up, Caleb. Just shut up and let me think," Whitaker snapped, running a hand through his thinning hair. He wasn't wearing a jacket. He didn't announce himself. We were conducting a lawful Terry stop based on suspicious behavior. He became belligerent. He matched a description. We stick to the story. The door swung open and Greg Harlan, the precinct's union representative, walked in. He looked displeased. "Whitaker, Torres, I just got a frantic call from the desk sergeant. Tell me exactly what happened before I go in there to talk to Lang." Whitaker immediately launched into his rehearsed lie. "Greg, it's a witch hunt. We spotted a suspicious individual matching a general description of a mule. Bag was heavy. He was acting evasive." I initiated a standard stop. The guy gets hostile, gets in my face, refuses to identify himself, and makes a sudden movement toward his chest. I grabbed his arm to secure him, and then he flashes a federal badge. Total entrapment. Harlan took notes, his expression unreadable. He made a sudden movement. You felt your life was in danger? Absolutely, Whitaker lied without hesitating. It was a fluid, dangerous situation. Harlan nodded. All right, stay here. Don't say another word to anyone. Moments later, Harlan walked confidently into Captain Lang's office, ready to run interference. He stopped short when he saw Marcus Ellison standing there, arms crossed, radiating absolute authority. Captain, Harlan started, I've spoken to my clients. From what I understand, this agent was acting erratically and refused to identify himself during a routine. Lang held up a hand, silencing the union rep. He turned his computer monitor around so it faced the room. Save it, Greg, just watch. Lang hit play. The screen split into two feeds. The left side showed the silent, high-definition overhead footage from the terminal dome camera. The right side showed the shaky, chest-level footage from Whitaker's body camera, complete with crystal-clear audio. They watched the entire interaction unfold. They heard Marcus's calm, polite voice. They heard Whitaker's aggressive, escalating tone. They watched Marcus perfectly cite case law, only for Whitaker to step into his personal space, fabricate the narcotics lie, and demand the bag. Then, the climax. The body cam footage showed Marcus standing perfectly still, his hands in plain sight. It captured Whitaker barking a command, reaching out, and violently grabbing Marcus's jacket. It captured Marcus's lightning-fast block and his slow, telegraphed reach into his pocket, accompanied by his clear, authoritative command not to draw weapons. The video ended with the gold FBI badge filling the frame of Whitaker's body cam. Harlan stared at the frozen frame, the color slowly leaving his face. He closed his notebook and tucked his pen into his shirt pocket. He was a union man, paid to protect cops, but he wasn't a miracle worker. Well, Harlan muttered, clearing his throat. That is not the version of events Officer Whitaker just provided me. No kidding, Lang spat, furious. He lied to you, Greg. He lied on the tape. He assaulted a federal agent, and he nearly compromised a classified DOJ investigation. He's done. I want his badge, and I want Torres's badge. Marcus finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension like a razor. Captain Lang, Marcus said, taking their badges is a good start. But this isn't an internal department matter anymore. This is a federal issue. By this afternoon, the situation had escalated from a local precinct disaster to a full-blown federal crisis. Marcus had not boarded his flight to Washington. Instead, he had commandeered a private conference room down the hall from Lang's office, opened his secure laptop, and initiated a secure video conference with Special Agent in Charge Laura Bennett at the FBI field office in Chicago. Bennett was a formidable woman who had spent 2 decades climbing the ranks of the Bureau. When Marcus briefed her on the incident, showing her the body cam footage that Lang had surrendered to him, the digital room went completely silent. He grabbed your jacket and attempted to seize the Indiana wiretap files? Bennett asked, her voice dangerously quiet over the speakers. Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied. And based on the body cam audio, the stop was entirely pretextual. It was a racial profile, pure and simple. But here is the bigger issue. S.A.C. Bennett. Whitaker's confidence, the way he bypassed standard procedure, the way he lied about a narcotics bulletin without hesitation. He's done this before. This wasn't an isolated power trip. This is his standard operating procedure. Bennett nodded slowly. I agree. If he's comfortable trying to strong-arm a man in a crowded terminal, imagine what he does to civilians who don't have a gold shield in their pocket. Exactly, Marcus said. I want to request immediate authorization to forward this incident to the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. I want Title 18, U.S.C., Section 242 applied. Deprivation of rights under color of law. And I want a full audit of Whitaker's arrest records for the last several years. Granted, Bennett said without hesitation. I am dispatching a federal investigative team to your location right now. Do not let those officers leave that building. Marcus, we are taking jurisdiction. While the federal gears were grinding into motion, another devastating blow struck the airport police authority from an entirely different angle. The bystander who had recorded the altercation near the VYP lounges didn't wait for an official press release. They uploaded the video directly to social media. It was titled, "Racist Airport Cops Try to Harass a Guy. Find Out He's FBI." The internet moves with ruthless efficiency. Within a short time, the video had amassed millions of views. It was picked up by major news networks in Chicago and was rapidly trending nationally. The footage perfectly captured Whitaker's aggressive manhandling, Marcus's icy professional takedown, and the glorious, pathetic moment when Whitaker practically shrunk into himself upon seeing the badge. The public relations nightmare was catastrophic. The mayor's office was calling the airport commissioner. The commissioner was calling Captain Lang. The precinct switchboard was lit up like a Christmas tree, with calls from outraged citizens and hungry journalists. Inside the holding room, the walls were rapidly closing in on Whitaker and Torres. Captain Lang entered the room, followed closely by two FBI agents in sharp suits who had just arrived from the Chicago field office. Whitaker stood up, trying to muster some semblance of authority, but it was useless. "Whitaker?" "Torres," Lang said, his voice completely devoid of sympathy. "Stand up and place your badges and your service weapons on the table. You are both suspended indefinitely without pay, effective immediately." "Captain, you can't!" Whitaker protested, his voice pitching high with panic. "The union dropped you moments ago when the video hit the evening news," Lang interrupted harshly. "And I'm not the one doing this." He gestured to the two agents behind him. One of the agents stepped forward. "Richard Whitaker, Caleb Torres, we are federal agents with the Department of Justice. You are officially under investigation for violations of Title 18, United States Code, Section 242. We have secured federal warrants for your department emails, your mobile devices, and every single arrest report you have filed in the last several years." Whitaker's legs gave out. He collapsed back into his metal chair, all the arrogance completely drained from his body. He knew his history. He knew about the random searches of minorities that yielded nothing, the excessive force complaints that had been quietly buried by friendly sergeants, the falsified probable cause narratives. If the feds opened his jacket, they wouldn't just find a firing offense. They would find years of federal prison time. He was ruined, instantly, irreparably ruined. Across the table, Torres watched his mentor crumble. The younger officer had joined the force hoping to do good, but had quickly fallen under Whitaker's toxic influence, learning that compliance and silence were the only ways to survive the shift. But looking at the federal agents, Torres realized the game was over. Loyalty to Whitaker was a sinking ship, and it was about to drag him to the bottom of the ocean. "Agents!" Torres blurted out, his voice trembling so violently he could barely form the words. Whitaker snapped his head up, glaring at his partner. "Caleb, shut your mouth." "No, you shut up!" Torres yelled back, tears welling in his eyes. He turned back to the feds, his hands raised in surrender. "I didn't want to touch him. Whitaker told me to cuff him. He does this all the time. He tells me to look for heavy bags on minorities and make up a reason to stop them. I can prove it. I kept a log in my locker. I'll tell you everything. Just please. I'll testify against him." The betrayal hung in the air, thick and absolute. Whitaker stared at Torres, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The hard karma hadn't just arrived. It had kicked the door off the hinges and completely dismantled his life in the span of a few hours. He had gone from an untouchable predator in a uniform to a disgraced, federally indicted suspect betrayed by his own partner, Budko. Back in the conference room, Marcus Ellison stood by the window, looking out over the tarmac as a massive jet lifted into the cloudy Chicago sky. He closed his laptop. The adrenaline had faded, leaving only a bone-deep exhaustion. He didn't feel a sense of triumph. There was no joy in taking down dirty cops. It was just a grim necessity. He thought about how close the situation had come to violence, and how easily a man without his training, without his badge, could have been beaten, arrested, or worse, simply for walking to a gate. The door opened behind him, and Captain Lang walked in. The older man looked like he had aged years in the last several hours. "Agent Ellison," Lang said quietly. "The DOJ agents have them. Whitaker's locker is being tossed right now. Torres is in an interview room singing like a bird. He's giving up a half-dozen other bad stops Whitaker initiated over the past several years." Marcus turned away from the window. "Good. Ensure the victims of those stops are contacted and provided with the federal file numbers. They deserve to have their records expunged." "We will," Lang promised, looking down at his shoes. "For what it's worth, I am deeply sorry. Marcus, this department failed today." "No, Captain," Marcus corrected him, his tone firm but remarkably calm. "This department has been failing for years. Today is just the day the bill finally came due." Marcus picked up his duffel bag, slinging the heavy strap over his shoulder. The weight of the classified files felt familiar against his back. "If you'll excuse me, Captain," Marcus said, walking past the broken police chief toward the door. "I believe there's a later flight to Washington, and I am incredibly tired." By the next morning, the video of Special Agent Marcus Ellison dropping his badge on Officer Shane Whitaker had bypassed viral status and become a cultural flashpoint. It was broadcasting on a continuous loop across every major cable news network, generating thousands of reaction videos and dominating the digital public square. The Airport Police Authority was in full crisis containment mode, but there was no containing a fire this massive. Behind the scenes, the Department of Justice was not interested in public relations. They were interested in a surgical dissection of Shane Whitaker's entire career. Special Agent in Charge. Laura Bennett assigned two of her most relentless investigators, Special Agent Rebecca Quinn and Special Agent Jonathan Brody, to lead the historical audit of Whitaker's arrests. Operating out of a secured conference room at the Chicago field office, Quinn and Brody began pulling thread after thread, unraveling a tapestry of corruption that went far deeper than anyone had initially anticipated. Whitaker wasn't just a bully with a badge and a racial bias. He was a predator running a highly profitable extortion racket. The breakthrough came during Torres's second proper session. Sitting in an interrogation room with his attorney, the young, terrified officer broke down completely. He confessed that Whitaker specifically targeted individuals he believed were unlikely to fight back, minorities, people with heavy accents, and travelers who looked panicked or disoriented. Whitaker would initiate an illegal stop, threaten them with detention, and then conduct an inventory search of their bags, Torres admitted, staring at his trembling hands. If he found cash, large amounts of it, he wouldn't log it. He would tell the traveler that he was confiscating the money under suspicion of civil asset forfeiture tied to narcotics. He told them if they challenged it, he would arrest them and put them in the federal system. Most of them were just scared. They walked away. Whitaker kept the money. Quinn and Brody immediately subpoenaed Whitaker's financial records. The paper trail was devastatingly clear. While Whitaker lived on a modest municipal salary, his bank accounts showed a pattern of structured, untraceable cash deposits occurring precisely on the days he worked the morning shift at Terminal 3. He had paid off a substantial mortgage on a lakeside cabin entirely in cash over several years. The karma that was coming for Whitaker was no longer just about a civil rights violation. It was a sprawling federal indictment encompassing theft of property under color of law, wire fraud, tax evasion, and witness intimidation. Whitaker's world collapsed with terrifying speed. He had spent his career hiding behind the formidable shield of the police union, confident that the Brotherhood would always protect him. But the sheer undeniable nature of the video, coupled with the immediate federal takeover, made him radioactive. The union president publicly distanced the organization from Whitaker, explicitly stating they would not fund his legal defense against federal criminal charges. Desperate, Whitaker tried to hire a high-profile private defense attorney. The lawyer took one look at the trending video, the DOJ press release, and the asset freeze order the FBI had just slapped on Whitaker's bank accounts and demanded a substantial retainer paid up front in cleared funds. Whitaker, locked out of his stolen wealth, couldn't pay it. He was forced to accept a public defender. His personal life disintegrated just as fast. The press had swarmed his suburban home. His wife, humiliated by the national spectacle and horrified to discover that the renovations on their house were funded by money extorted from innocent travelers, packed her bags and left him, taking their teenage daughter with her. Within a short time of the incident at Terminal 3, Shane Whitaker was sitting alone in a cheap rented motel room, stripped of his badge, his gun, his family, and his freedom, waiting for the inevitable knock on the door. When the knock came, it wasn't a gentle tap. It was the heavy, rhythmic pounding of the FBI execution team. Brody and Quinn led the entry, arresting Whitaker early one morning. As they placed the heavy steel handcuffs on his wrists, the very same type of cuffs he had eagerly tried to slap on Marcus Ellison, Whitaker wept. There was no bravado left. The bully had finally been cornered by a force he could not intimidate. Meanwhile, in Washington, Marcus Ellison had returned to his standard routine. Though routine was a relative term for the organized crime task force, he had successfully delivered the encrypted hard drives from the Indiana raid, resulting in the dismantling of a massive trafficking syndicate. He was summoned to the director's office on the top floor of the J. Edgar Hoover building. The director of the FBI, a stern man with decades of intelligence experience, shook Marcus's hand warmly. "You handled yourself with extraordinary restraint, Agent Ellison," the director said, gesturing for Marcus to sit. "Most men would have escalated that situation physically. You let the law do the heavy lifting. You did the Bureau proud." "Thank you, sir," Marcus replied, his tone remaining rigorously professional. He didn't smile. The director noticed. "You don't seem particularly victorious." Marcus leaned forwards, his hands clasped together. "With all due respect, Director, the system only worked because I had a gold shield in my pocket. If I was just an accountant, or a construction worker, or a teacher trying to get home to my family, Whitaker would have ruined my life that morning. He would have planted something, or escalated it until I reacted, and I'd be the one sitting in a cell right now with a destroyed reputation." Marcus paused, thinking of the financial records the Chicago field office had uncovered. He preyed on people who didn't have the power to fight back. Taking him off the board is a victory, yes, but it's a symptom of a much larger disease. The director nodded slowly, acknowledging the hard, uncomfortable truth of Marcus's words. "You're right, which is exactly why I want you to testify at his sentencing. The judge needs to hear that perspective." Months later, the bitter chill of a Chicago winter rattled the heavy glass windows of the Everett McKinley Dirksen United States Courthouse. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. The trial of United States versus Shane Whitaker had been swift and brutal. Whitaker's public defender, a sharp but overworked attorney, had tried to argue that Whitaker was the victim of a chaotic airport environment and poor departmental training. It was a futile effort. The prosecution, led by Assistant United States Attorney Marcus Thorne, dismantled the defense with surgical precision. Thorne didn't just play the viral video. He brought the victims into the light. One by one, the people Whitaker had extorted took the stand. There was Maria Hernandez, a grandmother whose life savings of several $1,000s in cash meant for her grandson's medical bills had been seized by Whitaker without a receipt. There was Jamal Reed, a young college student who had missed his father's funeral because Whitaker had detained him in a holding cell for hours over a fabricated suspicious behavior charge simply because Jamal had talked back. The jury wept. The gallery seethed. Whitaker, dressed in a faded orange jumpsuit, stared at the wooden table in front of him, physically shrinking into his chair as the mountain of his own sins buried him alive. The nail in the coffin was Caleb Torres. The former officer, having taken a plea deal, testified for hours. He detailed every protocol Whitaker ordered him to break, every racist remark made in the squad car, and every dollar they had skimmed. Torres's voice shook, his shame palpable. But he laid the truth bare for the federal record. When Marcus Ellison was called to the stand, a heavy silence fell over the courtroom. Marcus wore a sharply tailored charcoal suit, his posture immaculate, radiating the quiet, absolute authority that had terrified Whitaker in the terminal. Under oath, Marcus recounted the events of that morning with cold, objective clarity. He didn't embellish. He didn't need to. The raw facts were damning enough. "Agent Ellison," Thorne asked, pacing slowly in front of the jury box, "based on your professional experience in law enforcement, was there any legitimate articulable suspicion to justify Officer Whitaker's stop?" "None whatsoever," Marcus replied, his voice echoing clearly across the wood-paneled room. It was a targeted action based entirely on racial profiling. It was an abuse of power designed to humiliate and intimidate. And when he reached for your bag containing classified federal intelligence, what was your assessment of the threat? "My assessment," Marcus said, his eyes briefly locking onto Whitaker's, "was that a rogue actor was attempting to illegally breach federal security protocols. He was acting completely outside the bounds of the United States Constitution." The jury deliberated for a short time. They returned guilty verdicts on all counts. The sentencing hearing took place shortly afterward. The Honorable Patricia Langford, a federal judge known for her zero-tolerance policy on police corruption, presided over the courtroom. She looked down at Whitaker from her elevated bench, her expression a mask of absolute disdain. "Mr. Whitaker," Judge Langford began, her voice ringing out like a cracked whip, "law enforcement officers are entrusted with the greatest power a society can grant, the power to detain, the power to seize, and the power to use force. You treated that sacred trust like a personal weapon to terrorize the innocent and line your own pockets." Whitaker stood before her, flanked by U.S. Marshals. He was sobbing quietly, his shoulders shaking. "You did not just profile Special Agent Ellison," Langford continued relentlessly. "You attempted to rob him of his dignity. When you discovered he was a federal agent, your courage vanished. You are not a protector of the peace, Mr. Whitaker. You are a coward who hid behind a badge to bully those you deemed beneath you. Today, the shield you disgraced offers you no protection." Judge Langford adjusted her glasses and delivered the fatal blow. "On the counts of deprivation of rights under color of law, wire fraud, and extortion, I sentence you to a total of 144 months, 12 full years, in a maximum security federal penitentiary. You will serve this sentence without the possibility of early parole. Upon your release, you will be subject to 5 years of supervised probation, and you are permanently barred from holding any position of public trust. 12 years federal time." Whitaker's knees buckled. If the marshals hadn't caught him by the elbows, he would have collapsed onto the courtroom floor. He was dragged out of the room, his wails echoing down the marble hallway long after the heavy oak doors swung shut. Caleb Torres, recognizing his cooperation, was sentenced to probation, community service, and a lifetime ban from law enforcement. He walked out of the courthouse a free man, but a broken one, destined to carry the stain of his complicity forever. Outside the Dirksen courthouse, the winter sky was beginning to clear, letting a few sharp rays of sunlight pierce the clouds. Marcus Ellison stood on the steps, pulling the collar of his wool overcoat up against the wind. He was approached by Jamal Reed, the young college student who had testified earlier in the week. Jamal looked nervous, shifting his weight from side to side. "Agent Ellison?" Jamal asked softly. Marcus turned, offering a respectful nod. "Mr. Reed, you did a brave thing up there on the stand. Taking on a cop in court isn't easy." "I only did it because you caught him," Jamal said, shoving his hands into his jacket pockets. "When he did it to me, I tried to tell people. I tried to file a complaint. They basically laughed me out of the precinct. They told me I was lucky he didn't charge me with resisting. I thought that was just how the world was going to be for me." Jamal looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes. "When I saw that video of you putting him in his place, it felt like I could finally breathe. Thank you, not just for busting him, but for showing everyone exactly who he was." Marcus looked at the young man, seeing the lingering exhaustion of a trauma that Whitaker had callously inflicted. He reached out and shook Jamal's hand, a firm, grounding grip. "You never have to accept an abuse of power, Jamal," Marcus said quietly. "The badge is supposed to be a promise to the public, not a threat. And when they break that promise, we break them." Marcus turned and walked down the steps, blending into the busy stream of pedestrians navigating the Chicago streets. He was anonymous again, just another man in a dark coat walking through the city. But the ripple effect of his refusal to back down had shattered a corrupt system, freed dozens of silenced victims, and delivered a brutal, uncompromising dose of justice that the city would not soon forget. What a spectacular downfall. Shane Whitaker thought he had absolute power over anyone who crossed his path, but the universe delivered the ultimate reality check when he targeted the absolute wrong man. Special Agent Marcus Ellison didn't just defend himself. He exposed a predator and tore down a localized system of corruption with nothing but calm, professional, and lethal precision. It is a powerful reminder that true authority doesn't need to scream, and that those who abuse their power will eventually find themselves facing the full, terrifying weight of the justice system. If this story of brutal, instant karma and justice served resonated with you, do us a huge favor. Hit that like button to help push this story out to more people. Share this video with anyone who loves a perfect twist ending. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next incredible true story. Leave a comment below. What would you have done if you were in Marcus's shoes?